Hey, okay, so this video is going to be on a subject that's related to other videos that I've made, but I think it's always relevant. And I would ask people, the people that I'm critical of are clearly, I'm not going to get through to them because they've got a polar opposite view than what I do, right? So I'm not really interested in changing their minds. I know I can't. I'm not so arrogant to think that I've got that sort of power. But I do ask those who are kind of wavering and uncertain to really, really consider the things I'm talking about. You don't have to agree with me. All I ask is that you just consider it a little bit. So, I want to talk about RT, Russia Today, although they've dropped that incidentally, which is mildly amusing. RT has long been accused of being a propaganda mouthpiece for the Russian government, and I believe it is. But I think one of the reasons that RT has been successful, it has developed pretty fast from being a small network in about 2004 to now being a major international network. Contrary to what it says, it is mainstream news. It's just that it is mainstream news in Russia. RT is very smart in the sense that it presents itself as rebellious, as a kind of outsider, questioning authority. But RT is authority. That is the first thing that you need to understand about RT, because what they do is present themselves as being kind of these Robin Hood characters, going up against big media conglomerates like CNN and Fox. And oh, but RT tells the truth. You need to really, really think critically when it comes to RT. One thing I've noticed, and I've said this before, but it's worth mentioning again. If you go to pretty much any RT video, they're worded in such a way as to present opinions over facts. RT, their motto is, I forget exactly, it's something like hear the other side or something laughable like that. But you need to think critically when it comes to RT. If you're very, very critical of the European Union or the British government or pretty much any Western institution apart from Donald Trump, um, because you'll notice that RT is not that critical of the Trump administration, and I think that's significant. But anyway, if you are personally very critical of the EU or the British government or anything, I ask you, just for a few minutes, take away your biases, right? You can still be critical of them, that's fine, but just consider the role that RT plays and ask yourself this question. Do you support RT, or do you think that you would support RT because they are saying the things that you want to hear? Or do you support them because you genuinely believe it is the truth? Maybe it's a bit of both. One thing that I have noticed on any RT video, the comments are unanimously, slavishly in agreement with the line that RT is churning out. So there is an absolute absence of any critical thinking among those who blindly support RT. This is very obvious, and this is different from the likes of CNN, because if you check out any CNN video or BBC video or even Fox News video, yes, you'll get supportive comments, but you'll also get a fair number of critical comments. Now, that to me is a very telling difference. It suggests to me that RT is very effective in duping people into believing that it is legitimate as simply another point of view. Because people have, there's an academic term for this, which I forget now, but it's sort of a bias, an inset bias whereby they're supporting RT because it's telling them what they want to hear. So, if you're critical of the EU, the RT has a negative commentary on the EU, you're going to lap it up. Now, this may be true of networks in general. Every network has bias, there's no question about that. But as an example of the polarizing and bipolar thinking, I should say, of those who support RT, their mentality is if you're critical of RT, then by extension you must be automatically supportive of CNN or the BBC. Well, I've been very critical of both networks for a range of different reasons. I think they've a very left wing bias, and I've been very critical of the way they've covered a lot of issues. But to an average RT zealot, they're not capable of seeing the difference between criticizing RT and also being critical of other networks. Very occasionally, you see people that kind of watch RT and they kind of support it, but they agree that it is Russian state mouthpiece. But more often, you get people who are just ignorant to that fact. And that's what it is. Russia Today was set up by Russian ultra-nationalists primarily to promote Russian foreign policy. That's why they have a very positive assessment of the Russian role in Syria. Why? Because they're trying to present Russian foreign policy in a good light. Can you honestly say that CNN or the BBC have a blinding praise of British or American foreign policy? Certainly not. So that is a fundamental difference. I find it ironic that people on RT video I've just watched, because it was covering the Jim Acosta situation at CNN, were saying that CNN is a state mouthpiece. Well, that's a contradiction. How can it be a state mouthpiece when it's at loggerheads with the American president? Does that make sense? It's a contradiction. You can't, on one hand, say it's a state mouthpiece and then say it's critical of the American government. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. By contrast, ask yourself, does RT ever, ever, ever question Vladimir Putin? Never, never, never. Not once in its history has RT said anything critical about Putin. Now, RT is not unique among state networks that are completely, um, incapable of showing any scrutiny of the government in which they represent. The Chinese networks are, that's completely in their character, but you expect that from a communist country. Russia is not exactly a communist country, but it is definitely authoritarian under Putin. When RT has the gall to talk about press freedom, do they talk about those journalists who've been critical of the Putin regime going missing, making violent ends? Never, never. So they preach about Julian Assange and other critics of the West who haven't actually been murdered, incidentally. Um, I personally, I don't want to make this video about Julian Assange, but if you look at the sort of people that RT holds up to be some sort of heroes, almost unanimously, they have vested interests against the West in the sense that their whole worldview is West is bad, and they either ignore or downplay other power players. So with that comes an agenda. And if you cannot see it, if you can't see that, I almost feel sorry for you. What RT does is they hold up conspiracy theorists and disgruntled former employees to be, you know, legitimate sources or just another point of view. What I would say is yes, these people have a right to their view, but why does RT never ever invite anybody who they disagree with? Everyone that RT invites on the show are people who agree with them. Think about that for a second. Why? What does RT ever invite anyone, for example, who's very critical of Russian state aggression? Never. Why? Because RT was founded by Russian ultranationalists, so it would go against their interest. There was famous incidents when RT anchors quit on air, very bravely, I might add. And I hope it happens more. But RT I consider to be a weapon. It's a weapon used by the Russian state to try and stir up resentment and animosity and division within Western countries. And that's not to say that those divisions wouldn't exist without RT, but RT is, adding oil to the fire, and they love it. RT absolutely loves the idea of a Europe in crisis. RT loves the idea of tensions within Britain. They savor it. They salivate at the idea. RT is basically an ultra nationalist network. And it, I hate it. I don't mind admitting that. I hate it because I see it as a threat to my country. I see it as a threat to reasonable thinking as well. My issue is not that RT is against the West. My issue is the absolute phoniness of RT's claims that they're just seeking another point of view. They are professional liars in the sense that they claim to be an independent news source, but they're not. That is a lie. They're part of the Russian government. They deny it, but you do a bit of homework and you'll see that's exactly what they are. I do think RT should have been banned from broadcasting in the UK. Why? Because they are used as a weapon against British national security. So why should they be allowed to stir up internal divisions? Why should they be allowed to foster animosity? Why should they be allowed to stoke up conspiracy theories? A lot of RT's so called different opinions are nothing more than baseless conspiracy theories. And they dig up people like ex CIA employees and so on who can kind of wolf whistle, act as the sort of dog whistle, excuse me, to say, oh, look at what the big bad CIA or American government's doing. But they never, ever, ever hold the same standards to the Russian government. That's what I hate about RT, they're double standards. Now, you can say there's double standards in every network. The difference is other networks um, don't pretend that they might say, for example, they'll all boast about themselves, but I don't see how you can say CNN's a state mouthpiece when it's critical of the American president. That's a contradiction. CNN has plenty of faults, no question about it. Um, but that isn't the issue here. The issue is that people who tend to follow RT are not critical thinkers. They think that they're smart, they think that they're being rebellious, they think that they know everything, but they really don't, because all they are doing is lapping up what the Kremlin tells them. And that's what it is, it's the Kremlin. It isn't a sort of independent news source that is saying, oh, we have consistent standards. No, they don't. I think RT is pure poison. It's the mouthpiece of an authoritarian, thuggish regime that has caused tens of thousands of deaths in Syria, that invaded a sovereign country in Ukraine, that continues to threaten smaller countries, that interferes in foreign elections. I mean, this goes on. And RT is nothing but the propaganda wing of this regime. So you may be thinking, oh, but Nathan, what about, Fox is very right wing and it's really supporting hawkish American policies. CNN's really left wing, it supports a liberal agenda. That's true, I would agree with you. But if you then go to say, oh, well, at least RT tells the truth, that's where I draw the line and say, don't be an idiot. Don't allow yourself to become a useful idiot for Putinism. Because RT is poison. I mean, I must admit, I try to avoid going to RT videos because I just lose my temper seeing how blindly people lap it all up. And when you get the likes of George Galloway, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a traitor, why? Because he is working for the Russian government, essentially, at a time when Russia has shown that it is a threat to British national security. As far as I'm concerned, George Galloway is a traitor. And yet, RT holds him up to be a credible source. Just consider if the BBC, well, I guess you could say that they have. The BBC takes Russian dissidents and interviews them. The Kremlin would be shouting about that. So why shouldn't we hit back? I cannot understand the mentality of a Briton or American or a Canadian who's against their own government, which is legitimate, but then goes on to actively support a hostile foreign regime. If you support RT, you're supporting the Russian government. And if that's your position, be honest about it. Don't say that you support RT, but it's not about supporting the Russian government. You cannot divorce the two. RT is the Russian government. That's a fact. It is a plain, solid fact. My concern is RT is unfortunately winning the cyber war because what they do is they get these clickbait headlines that they know people will be taken in by. The truth about this, the truth about that. Um, brave Canadian journalist tells the truth about Syria, Eva Bartlett. Eva Bartlett is not an independent journalist. She is an Assad stooge. She is not an independent journalist. What does RT do? Hold her up to be some sort of heroic martyr for free journalism. But she is an insult to those brave Syrian journalists who have paid with their lives. She is an insult to journalists who actually stand up against authoritarian regimes. What Eva Bartlett is nothing but a mouthpiece for one of the world's most brutal dictatorships. So that's what RT does. They hold up people like her to be heroes. She's not a hero. But like I say, I'm well aware that I'm not going to get through to RT zealots. They're sheep. They're not capable of seeing reason. They have a bipolar vision, black and white, and that's the difference between me and them. I don't say the BBC, CNN, and Fox are without fault. I don't say that American, British, Canadian governments are without criticism. What I'm saying is that if you think RT is some independent source, you are deluded. You are utterly, utterly deluded. RT is a weapon. That's what it is. And I think, whilst I think Theresa May did take a hard line against Russian state aggression, I think we should have went further and banned RT. Why should we allow a hostile network that is vociferously anti-British to, stir up mistrust against all of our institutions? Why? It's a weapon. I absolutely despise RT, and I think I would love to see its influence collapse, but unfortunately, people are stupid. They buy into it, they share the videos, and they think it's telling the truth. It's not that everything RT says is factually wrong, but what they do is they are promoting the Russian state agenda. Wake up. Just wake up. So that's it. That's what I say. And I'm not the only one. But like I say, it's a waste of time trying to debate people on an RT video because they don't want to hear a different point of view. All they want to hear is what they want to hear, which is West bad, Russia good. And if you have that sort of mentality, then it's pathetic, really.